In today's video, I'll be explaining Dark Souls' most disturbing moments across all 3 games. Some of these moments will make you rethink whether difficulty was ever the worst thing this series threw at you, and one moment at the end reveals why From Software studied exactly how much horror players could handle before breaking. But first, we need to talk about a dragon that evolved wrong, because if you understand what happened to its body, you'll understand what this trilogy does to every creature that tries to survive in it. Smough crushes. When your boss fight buddy becomes your boss fight lunch, you know things went sideways. Ornstein and Smough represent peak duo combat design until the moment Smough decides his partner looks tastier than his paycheck. Kill Ornstein first and watch Smough pulverize his corpse into paste before absorbing his power. The executioner just crushes his own teammate's body with his hammer, grinding armor and bones together for a mid-battle power boost like he's slamming an energy drink. There's no hesitation, no remorse, just pure cannibalistic opportunism. The lore never explains if this was always the plan or if Smough just really hated working overtime, but the sound design sells it with crunching metal and squelching organic matter that makes you wonder what the cafeteria situation was like in Anor Lundo. Players expected epic night combat. From Software delivered workplace betrayal with extra protein. The moment works because it violates player expectations completely. You're focused on survival, managing 2 boss patterns simultaneously, and suddenly the game reminds you that Honor died with Gwyn's Age of Fire. Smough doesn't care about brotherhood or warrior codes. He sees calories and stat boosts. The executioner's reputation for grinding bones of criminals takes on new meaning when you realize his own partner wasn't exempt from the grinder. This single animation redefined how From Software could use boss mechanics to tell horror stories, proving that what happens between enemies matters just as much as what they do to you. Gaping Dragon. Picture a dragon that said screw evolution. I'm going full nightmare fuel instead. The Gaping Dragon represents what happens when even ancient magical creatures can't resist gluttony's corruption. This isn't some majestic archdragon from Ash Lake. This is what happens when a dragon's entire torso evolves into a vertical rib cage lined with teeth, creating a maw that opens like the world's worst elevator door. The thing doesn't have a head anymore because its chest cavity ate its brain budget. Miyazaki's team looked at traditional dragon design and asked, what if we made the rib cage the main character? And thus body horror royalty was born. When it charges, you're not dodging dragonfire. You're avoiding becoming organic toothpaste. The design philosophy flips every dragon trope. No wings, no fire breathing, just pure devouring biomass housed in what used to be a prestigious magical creature. Players descending into the depths expect rats and darkness. Instead, they get introduced to a creature that defines the entire series' approach to grotesque design. The Gaping Dragon moves with disturbing organic fluidity despite being mostly ribs and nightmare fuel. Its attacks involve using its vestigial head nub to bite while the ribcage maw does the real damage. From Software even gave it a weak tail that drops scales, forcing players who want full completion to stare directly at this abomination's anatomy while chopping bits off. The community nicknamed it Toothpaste Dragon, which feels like coping through humor. Vadavidya's lore videos on this thing rack up millions of views because people need explanations for what their eyes witnessed. The Gaping Dragon influenced everything from Dark Souls 2's Rotten to countless Souls-likes that tried replicating From Software's body horror formula. But gluttony corrupting dragons was just anatomy horror. What comes next proves From Software understood family trauma creates deeper scars than any monster design. Pinwheel's family. Some necromancers raise the dead. This one sewed his dead family to his own body and called it Tuesday. Pinwheel represents grief so desperate it becomes mutilation. The Catacombs boss isn't intimidating mechanically. Most players flatten him in seconds. But the visual storytelling hits different when you realize those 3 masks crying on his body belong to his wife and child. The necromancer couldn't accept death, so he performed surgery that makes Frankenstein look like a licensed medical professional. He literally stitched corpses to his torso, creating a 3-person horror show where masks face different directions, and the whole amalgamation shambles around Nito's tomb, stealing power to sustain this abomination of resurrection attempts. The masks whisper according to data miners. They're aware. They're trapped in flesh that isn't theirs anymore, forced to exist as organic accessories to a father and husband who couldn't let go. The fight itself feels almost disrespectful to players expecting challenge, but that's the point. Pinwheel is pathetic because his plan failed completely. He's weak, fragmented, literally falling apart at the seams he created. The real horror isn't the boss fight difficulty, it's imaging the surgical process. The moment this family man decided love meant forcing his dead relatives into eternal fusion with his living tissue. Dark Souls loves tragic tragic villains, but Pinwheel takes it to body horror extremes that make other bosses look well-adjusted. His soul description confirms he sought power to reunite his family, which somehow makes it worse. This wasn't malice. This was devotion corrupted into nightmare medical malpractice. The community debates whether to pity or fear him, which means From Software threaded that needle perfectly. Pinwheel proved family bonds could fuel horror, but bonds require individuals first, and one area strips even that away: Blighttown's existence. Calling Blighttown disturbing feels like calling the ocean damp. This isn't a level. This is a war crime disguised as game design. From Software quarantined an entire slum population in toxic sludge and made it mandatory progression. The descent starts with rickety scaffolding that frames your view of the nightmare waiting below. Toxic dart snipers you can barely see drain your health, while blowflies the size of dogs swarm from every angle. The swamp itself is poison incarnate, draining your health bar faster than your will to live, while leeches and diseased dogs chase you through the sludge. Inhabitants aren't just sick, they're infested. Toxic maggots burst from faces. Blight pus drips from wounds that won't close. The entire population became a failed experiment in chaos magic containment, sealed behind the depths, so Lordran's upper class could pretend problems disappear if you dump them underground. The frame rate on original releases added another layer of torture, turning the area into a slideshow of suffering that made the poison feel merciful by comparison. But the environmental horror is just set up for Blighttown's actual purpose, housing the Chaos Witches, who doomed themselves trying to recreate the first flame. The Fair Lady sits in her chamber, a colossal spider-human hybrid riddled with tumors slowly suffocating in blight pus. She sucks from followers who don't know she's dying to save them. Her stillborn eggs don't move anymore. She speaks in cryptic sentences if you have the old witch's ring, revealing she's blind in agony and considers this mercy work. Above her, Quelaag guards the entrance, herself a spider hybrid but still mobile, still dangerous, protecting a sister who absorbed too much poison trying to help plague victims. The entire area exists because compassion got weaponized into biological warfare. Blighttown's statistics tell horror stories in data form. Millions of players trapped in poison mechanics, 50+ enemy variants designed to maximize suffering, and purple moss clumps that become more valuable than souls themselves. The community spawned PTSD memes that persist 15 years later. Players joke about therapy costs. Speedrunners route around it entirely when possible. The remastered edition fixed the frame rate but kept the environmental nightmare intact because some horror is load-bearing structure for the entire game's tonal foundation. Blighttown teaches that civilizations handle problems by burying them alive, and sometimes the buried survive long enough to become new problems entirely. Miyazaki's poison swamp obsession started here and infected every game since, but Blighttown was just environmental torture. What lurks in the DLC takes that foundation and builds cosmic dread on top. Manus watches. Deep in the abyss, something older than gods stares back. Manus isn't a boss fight, he's proof humanity was never supposed to gain power. The Artorias of the Abyss DLC sends players to Ulasil's past, showing how experimentation on a primordial human created the father of the Abyss. Researchers tortured the pygmy until his humanity went feral, erupting into corruption that consumed an entire civilization. When you drop into his arena, the first thing you notice is darkness, so complete your screen dims. Then, the eyes light up. Red pinpricks in infinite void, glowing from depths that shouldn't exist in geometry. This game pretends follows rules. Those aren't boss indicators. They're warnings that something aware and ancient just noticed you exist. The Abyss isn't empty. It's watching through Manus's gaze, and that attention feels like radiation exposure for your sanity. Mechanically, Manus combines aggression with reach that feels unfair until you realize the lore implications. His attacks extend through dark magic because reality bends around concentrated humanity gone wrong. The grab attack doesn't just damage you, it pulls you into the void where those eyes live, and escaping feels less like dodging and more like reality deciding you're allowed to exist for another few seconds. The sound design layers whispers under his roars, suggesting consciousness that exceeds beast status. Manus isn't mindless. He's aware enough to suffer, aware enough to hate, and aware enough to recognize you as the same species that tortured him into this state. His soul description confirms the tragedy, a primordial human driven mad by greed for his pendant, the one connection to lost humanity. Players can return it, giving him seconds of peace before the fight resumes because redemption doesn't pause boss mechanics. The community treats Manus as cosmic horror done right. No tentacles needed when you have eyes in the dark that track movement and orphan screams encoded in audio files. His influence chains through the entire series. Fragments of his soul become Dark Souls 2's queens. His abyss spreads across games, and his existence proves the First Flame's age wasn't progress. It was containment failure waiting to happen. Manus taught From Software how to make dread patient, but patience requires subtlety, and one encounter throws subtlety off a cliff in favor of explicit violation. Seath's experiments. Some mad scientists create monsters. Seath created questions about whether death is actually the worst thing that can happen to you. The Duke's archives and Crystal Cave house remnants of obsession that makes Dr. Moreau look ethical. Seath the Scaleless, traitor to dragons and inventor of sorcery, spent ages hunting immortality by experimenting on anything with a pulse. The results shamble through his archives. Pisakas, former human maidens twisted into octopus-snake hybrids with too many eyes and limbs positioned wrong. Some are hostile, attacking with grab attacks that feel violating. Others cry, non-hostile, suggesting awareness trapped in bodies that don't respond to thoughts anymore. They make sounds that data miners confirm are layered human screams, pitch-shifted and distorted. The crystal golems are even worse when you learn each one houses a living person sealed inside magical stone, forced to attack intruders while conscious but unable to control their actions. The archives themselves feel like touring an active research facility. Bookshelves line walls describing experiments in clinical language that makes the screams downstairs more disturbing. Channelers, Seath's robed assistants, patrol the library collecting specimens, and you find cages full of undead waiting for their turn on the table. The bonfire is inside a jail cell. You rest surrounded by bars designed to hold experiment subjects, making it clear players aren't guests. You're just another sample that happened to be useful for now. When Seath captures you in the first encounter, it's not a cutscene gimmick. It's the canon experience every other undead went through before becoming a Pisaka. The boss fight feels almost anticlimactic after witnessing the aftermath of his research, but that tail cut required for the Moonlight Greatsword Force's extended exposure to his grotesque bulk. A dragon without scales, covered in excess flab that shouldn't exist on reptilian anatomy, blindly swinging at players while obsessing over crystals that mock the immortality he'll never achieve. Seath lost his mind chasing dragons' natural gifts, and his research facility shows what happens when intelligence has no ethical boundaries. The Pisakas, crying in corners, hit different when you remember they were probably maidens he kidnapped from Aenir Lundo, servants of Guinevere who never knew their boss's ally was stockpiling experimental subjects. Dark Souls 2 remembers Seath through Freya, the twin spiders fused at the abdomen, devouring dragon corpses and webs built from his research notes. The legacy of unchecked experimentation doesn't end with the scientist. It evolves, but evolving research requires moving between games, and Dark Souls 2 took that invitation personally. The Rotten. What if suffering achieved consciousness and decided violence was communication? The Rotten answers that question with a body count that's also his body. Black Gulch serves this boss up from a pit of tar and corpses. The Rotten isn't a creature. It's an amalgamation of undead who fused into a single moaning mass of torment. Different limbs fight for control. One arm holds a cleaver that drags through poison pools. Another reaches independently, grasping at air like it remembers having autonomy. The torso writhes with bodies that didn't quite merge, faces visible under skin stretched too tight over collective mass. It moans constantly, layered voices creating harmony from agony, suggesting the individuals trapped inside maintain some awareness, even as the collective shambles forward. Tanamura's Dark Souls 2 gets criticized for lacking Miyazaki's subtle touch, but the Rotten proves sometimes raw grotesque hits harder than elegant horror. This is body horror without metaphor. Corpses piled until they became ecosystem, until weight and decay and desperate undead clinging to each other created accidental fusion. The boss arena itself is stomach-turning, approached through a tunnel where corpse pillars line the path and distant heartbeats pulse in the audio. The poison pools aren't environmental hazards. They're the Rotten's fluids, leaked biology from a creature that shouldn't biologically function but persists because Dark Souls 2's curse won't let undead die cleanly. Mechanically, the Rotten moves slow but hits like accumulated trauma. The delay between attacks isn't sluggish AI, it's multiple nervous systems fighting over which gets motor control the second. The grab attack pulls you into the mass, and the camera angle ensures you see every absorbed face before damage numbers appear. Players defeat it for progression and souls, but the community voted it grossest boss in multiple polls because no amount of lore justification makes watching it move less nauseating. The soul description hints it might be a Nido reincarnation, the old dead one finding new form in this era's cycle, which tracks perfectly for From Software's approach. Gods don't die cleanly either. They just keep deteriorating into worse versions of themselves. The Rotten teaches that horror doesn't need complexity. Sometimes the most disturbing thing is watching suffering refuse to end, but individual suffering is intimate horror. Dark Souls 2 also excels at industrial-scale nightmare production. Aldia's Keep. Every mad scientist needs a lab. Aldia built his in a mansion designed to make Umbrella Corporation jealous, staffed it with abominations, and called it Knowledge Pursuit. The scholar of the first sin himself, Aldia, brother to King Vendrick, decided understanding the curse required experimenting on everything: dragons, giants, humans, and the concepts holding reality together. His keep stands as monument to research without safety committees. Mirror-trapped knights line hallways, alive inside reflective surfaces, aware but frozen. Dragon skeletons twitch in basement cages, reanimated through methods the game refuses to explain. Ogres wander upstairs like failed prototypes someone forgot to euthanize. The entire structure breathes wrong, architecture warped by attempts to force nature into submission through applied suffering. But the real horror is the forlorn if you're playing Scholar of the First Sin Edition. Invaders who appear throughout the keep, hollow warriors seeking purpose, added specifically to heighten isolation. They're not strong. They're sad, chasing players because Aldia's experiments taught them human connection only comes through violence. The achievement for killing enough forlorn feels like participation in cruelty, checking boxes on someone's research form about breaking point psychology. The environmental storytelling peaks in rooms full of cages stacked floor to ceiling, each barely large enough for a curled human. Some still have occupants. Most are empty, implying turnover rates that suggest Aldia went through subjects faster than Seath. Bonfires inside the keep feel wrong because you're resting in a building designed to prevent rest, where every corner housed suffering for data collection. Dark Souls 2 gets flack for not matching Dark Souls 1's tight design, but Aldia's keep proves when From Software wants pure laboratory horror, directorial style matters less than commitment to showing how curiosity becomes monstrosity. The keep influenced modern horror game design. Show the tools, imply the process. Let players imagine specifics their sanity creates better than any cutscene could, but implications only work until you show the actual result. Irithil's centipedes. Pontiff Sulivahn looked at human anatomy and asked, what if we made it worse in every direction simultaneously? His sewer monsters prove the answer is centipedes made from people. Dark Souls 3's Irithil of the Boreal Valley hides these abominations below pretty frozen architecture. Descend into the sewers and you'll find emaciated human torsos twisted into multi-limbed insect chassis that crawl along ceilings. These aren't parasites wearing hosts. The transformation integrated human tissue into bug structure, stretching limbs into too many legs and repositioning spines for horizontal locomotion that bodies weren't designed to support. They spit poison that builds up curse status. Because apparently being a human centipede wasn't enough suffering without also becoming a biological hazard, the design does something genuinely disturbing. It maintains recognizable human features mid-transformation. You can see rib definition. Fingers merge into leg segments, but knuckles remain visible. Faces stretch into insect mandibles, but eye sockets persist where they were. From Software forced their art team to thread a needle where the creature is clearly bug, while remaining unmistakably human underneath, creating uncanny valley nightmare fuel that makes players uncomfortable at biological level. These things move wrong because they're using human muscles for insect locomotion patterns. Lore hides in item descriptions. Sulivahn experimented on subjects in the profaned capital and Irithil's depths, seeking methods to create obedient servants. The centipedes patrol sewers because their transformation made them incompatible with normal architecture. They can't navigate stairs anymore. Sulivahn built an entire sewer system to house failures, and players wade through it, fighting things that used to have names and families and lives before becoming pest control for a mad pontiff's basement. The community largely doesn't discuss these enemies because they're missable optional content in late-game sewers, but speedrunners routing through that area for items had to develop strategies specifically for not looking at them during fights, because something about the visual design triggers stress responses that hurt performance. That's horror working on mechanical level. Enemy design so effective it becomes gameplay hindrance through sheer discomfort. Sulivahn's centipedes proved From Software learned from Seath that body horror works best when transformation preserves enough humanity to recognize what was lost. But recognizing loss requires having something to lose in the first place. Aldrich's feast. Some clergy devour gods metaphorically through prayer. Aldrich tried literal consumption and discovered gods taste like betrayal and maggots. His boss fight is puppeteering a corpse while shopping for seconds. Aldrich started as a cleric in Dark Souls 3's lore, then developed an appetite for human flesh, then upgraded to long menu when regular cannibalism stopped satisfying. By the time players reach Aenor Lundo, he's a sentient sludge monster piloting Gwendolyn's corpse like a meat puppet. The boss fight shows Gwendolyn's upper body emerging from Aldrich's blob, face locked in permanent scream. skull overflowing with maggots that spill out during certain animations. The Sludge Lord fires arrows using Gwendolyn's Dark Moon powers, because consuming a god means acquiring the divine abilities as side dish to the main course. The visual escalates throughout the fight. Gwendolyn's body degrades, losing cohesion as Aldrich puppeteers harder. Maggots don't just decorate, they're active, writhing in eye sockets and pouring from mouth holes while Aldrich makes the corpse cast miracles. The god of the Dark Moon, Gwyn's secret son, reduced to organic artillery for a cannibal's next meal. Item descriptions confirm Aldrich dreams of devouring gods, plural. Gwendolyn was practice. The Sludge Lord has a list. What makes this fight disturbing beyond the visuals is mechanical storytelling. Aldrich isn't present. The sludge mostly stays back while Gwendolyn's corpse does the work. Players fight a remote-controlled corpse of a character from Dark Souls 1, forced to damage what remains of a tragic figure while the thing wearing him as puppet stays safe. You're not killing Aldrich. You're destroying what's left of Gwendolyn, and Aldrich barely notices because there's always more gods to hunt. The community debates whether Gwendolyn was alive during consumption or if Aldrich animated a corpse. Either answer is nightmare fuel. Alive means Gwendolyn experienced being digested into sludge while maintaining enough coherence for Aldrich to puppet. Dead means Aldrich's consumption is so thorough it reanimates prey as extensions of himself. The boss soul confirms Aldrich envisioned a world built on devouring gods, making this fight a test run for apocalypse via cannibalism. Dark Souls 3 peaks here for visceral god horror, but visceral needs build-up, and one encounter proves suggestion carries weight. Oceiros loses. Some boss fights are epic confrontations. Some are watching a father kill his invisible child while dragon transformation ravages his sanity. Oceiros is the second one, and From Software cut the worst parts because even they have limits sometimes. The Consumed King's Garden houses Oceiros, scholar who became dragon through research similar to Seath's, but with worse parenting outcomes. He cradles an invisible baby named Ocelot through the first phase, muttering about his child's presence while swinging at players with one arm. The other arm protects empty space. His dialogue references the child directly, addressing Ocelot, warning you to stay away from his precious dragon heir. Then phase 2 triggers. Oceiros slams the ground. Audio plays a child's scream. The arm holding Ocelot goes limp. The boss transitions to four-legged dragon mode and berserks across the arena, no longer protecting anything because there's nothing left to protect. The implication lands hard. The Mad King crushed his own child in dragon transformation rage, but cut content data miners found makes it worse. Originally, players could see Ocelot's mangled corpse during the slam animation. From Software modeled a dead baby, animated its death, and decided that crossed the line for a game already including everything discussed so far. The community debates whether Ocelote was real or hallucination. The scream audio and boss dialogue suggest real. The invisible model implies hallucination. Both options are horrible. Either Oceiros killed his actual child during transformation, or his madness is so complete he believes he's protecting a dragon baby that never existed while his real children suffered in his absence. The Consumed King title refers to his dragon obsession consuming humanity, but the fight shows it consumed more than metaphorical concepts. What makes Oceiros' peak disturbing is restraint. We don't see the baby die, we hear it. Our brains fill gaps with worse images than From Software's modelers created. The cutscene removal from final version proves they understood crossing from disturbing into gratuitous, but they kept enough implication to traumatize players while maintaining plausible deniability about exact events. The arena's toxic puddles and mutated followers suggest Oceiros' research created casualties beyond family, but the personal tragedy of infanticide hits different than environmental body horror. Modders restored cut content, and those videos rack up views from players who need to see what From Software hid. That curiosity proves the encounter worked. We're so disturbed by implications, we'll hunt deleted files to confirm our fears. Oceiros teaches that sometimes the most disturbing moment is what you don't show, but sometimes you show everything and let players deal. Ash Lake's scale. Some areas disturb through violence. Ash Lake disturbs through revealing everything you believed was wrong. This isn't horror from suffering. This is existential dread from seeing too much truth. Descending through the Great Hollow's roots takes players to Ash Lake, a cavern so massive it contains an ocean, an endless tree, and Hydra. But the scale isn't the monster. The scale is the realization. Those massive trees supporting the world above, they're tiny. The actual arch trees extend beyond render distance, trunks wider than castles, roots deeper than player comprehension. The architecture proves Lordran is a small platform on a massive tree in a basement of reality, and basements go deeper deeper than you'll ever see. Standing on Ash Lake's shore, looking at fog that might be distance or might be the edge of what the game engine can process, players experience vertigo from insignificance. The entire game happened in tree branches. The conflicts, the gods, the linking of fire, all of it occurs on a platform floating above an ocean that exists in darkness these arch trees grew from. The Hydra attacking seems almost quaint compared to the spatial horror of understanding you're fighting on a twig. But then you see the dragon, the everlasting dragon, last of its kind, sitting passive at the shore. It doesn't attack. It watches. This is what Seath betrayed. This is what Gwyn's lightning nearly exterminated. And it's so far beyond player capability to threaten that it doesn't bother moving when you approach. The dragon offers Covenant membership, joining you to the path of the dragon, but the reward is learning you'll never be this. You'll never achieve the scale or permanence or simple existence without ambition these creatures embodied before gods declared war for territory rights. The environmental audio layers, ocean waves with distant groans that might be trees settling or might be the world breathing. There's no background music except the Cleric Covenant Miracle Ladies humming if you join. The silence is louder than any boss theme because it represents absence of purpose. Ash Lake doesn't care about your quest. It existed before fire, during fire, and will exist after fire. Your presence is temporary statistical noise on geological timescales. Players reaching Ash Lake often describe it as game's most beautiful area, but beauty and horror aren't opposites when the beauty comes from realizing you're cosmically irrelevant. The disturbing element is philosophical. If this is the foundation and it's empty of conflict or meaning, what does that say about everything happening in branches above? From Software uses Ash Lake sparingly in marketing, because it's hard to explain why an empty beach with a dragon is peak horror. You have to stand there, looking at trees that dwarf kingdoms, listening to an ocean that predates species, feeling the weight of insignificance before the dread settles. No amount of screenshots convey the experience of understanding you're fighting in a terrarium someone forgot about. The dragon stares at players with ancient eyes that have seen empires rise in branches and fall without impact to roots. That gaze communicates more horror than any monster design. You are brief, your struggles are irrelevant, and the world will continue without noticing your absence. Ash Lake proves, from Software understood, cosmic horror isn't tentacles. It's scale and time and the realization that existence doesn't require you. Fair Lady fades. Some tragedies happen in cutscenes. The Fair Lady's tragedy is ongoing conversation with players who arrive too late to help. She's dying in real time while thinking she's saving people. Quelaag's domain houses two sisters, Quelaag the boss and the Fair Lady behind a hidden wall. The Fair Lady is a colossal spider-human hybrid like her sister, but covered in tumors and blight pus. She's blind. She can barely move. And she's draining poison from Chaos Servant Covenant members who donate humanity, sucking blight into herself to ease their suffering. Players without the old witch's ring only hear inhuman sounds. With the ring, her dialogue reveals she mistakes you for her sister, asks about egg carriers, and thanks you for letting her help while slowly suffocating in accumulated poison. The eggs around her chamber don't move. They're stillborn, results of chaos magic corruption that turned daughters of the Witch of Izalith into spider hybrids in failed attempt to recreate the first flame. The Fair Lady absorbed responsibility for the failure, pulling poison from anyone who'd let her, dying incrementally to perform mercy she believes matters. She doesn't know most egg carriers are already hollow. She doesn't know her sister stands outside killing intruders to protect her. She exists in a small chamber, blind, riddled with tumors, thinking her suffering serves purpose. The Covenant progression requires feeding her humanity. Each donation plays dialogue thanking you, explaining how much better you must feel, describing her joy at being useful. Players gain pyromancy rewards. She gains more poison in her lungs. The transaction becomes participatory horror. You're accelerating her death for gameplay benefits while she thanks you for the privilege. Dark Souls loves making players complicit in tragedy, but the Fair Lady's Covenant makes it mechanical loop, killing her rewards, twin humanities and a firekeeper soul. Her soul description notes it's warm with love. She dies still believing she helped. That warmth is the disturbing element, not the body horror, not the poison mechanics, but the fact she maintained compassion while mutating into tumor-covered spider. Most enemies in Dark Souls became hostile through corruption. The Fair Lady became more kind, and it killed her slower. The community treats her as saddest character in the trilogy. Speedrunners root around her entirely to avoid emotional damage. Lore enthusiasts debate whether killing her is mercy or cruelty because Dark Souls Souls refuses to answer. She's trapped in dying biology, but conscious and trying to help. Would ending that be compassion or murder? The game lets you choose and judges neither option. From Software layered her tragedy across game mechanics. She's missable, hidden behind illusory wall and lava zone most players sprint through. Discovering her requires curiosity, and the old witch's ring requires planning or guides. Even reaching her takes effort, and the reward is learning you found someone who needed help years before you arrived. All you can do now is make her death slightly more comfortable while she thanks you for letting her suffer. Tomb of Giants. Some areas kill you with enemies. The Tomb of Giants kills you with the understanding that your prey now in light is a privilege revoked. This isn't difficulty. This is fear of the dark weaponized into level design. The descent from catacombs plunges players into darkness so complete the screen goes black. Not dim, black. You can't see ledges, enemies, or the 3 feet in front of your face without a light source. The sunlight maggot, skull lantern, or cast light miracle become mandatory equipment, forcing players to sacrifice a weapon slot or spell slot for the privilege of basic vision. And the things living in that darkness evolved to hunt without it. Skeleton beasts attack from blind spots. Massive dog-like creatures with reach that punishes panic rolls. Their audio design is perfect. Deep breathing and bone scraping that triangulates position but not exact distance. You hear them before seeing glowing eyes. Then the eyes move faster than your brain processes, and you're already hit. The giant skeletons patrol on sounds you make. Rolling, attacking. Healing all generate audio that pulls them towards you. The darkness isn't atmosphere. It's an enemy that enables every other threat, but the environmental horror peaks looking up. Occasionally, the darkness breaks enough to see scale. You're in a cavern. Walls extend beyond render distance, and way too far above, lights from Lordran shine like stars. The tomb exists in foundations below foundations, cut off from everything the surface considers civilization. This is where Nito, first of the dead, claimed territory. This is where death itself set up infrastructure for managing corpses. Finding the bonfire requires navigating pitch-black cliffs, where falling means losing souls and humanity in darkness you can't see them recover from. The bonfire itself sits in a small alcove, barely visible even with light sources, suggesting Patches the hyena put it there specifically to watch undead stumble past into abysses. Resting there while massive skeletons patrol outside, hearing them scrape through tunnels you can't monitor, creates paranoia that persists through entire area. The disturbing element is helplessness. Dark Souls built reputation on fair difficulty where every death teaches lessons. The tomb teaches that sometimes the lesson is you're not equipped for survival and should leave. Players who persist experience horror through attrition, deaths from invisible ledges, ambushes from dark, and the slow realization that this area's design philosophy is making you feel hunted. Nito's boss fight almost feels merciful after navigating his tomb. At least you can see him. At least there's space to roll. The fight isn't especially hard, but it follows hours of darkness navigation that leaves players grateful for any visible arena. From Software used the tomb to prove darkness itself is weapon, and players would accept any alternative. The Tomb of Giants influenced every From Software area since. Shrine of Amana's Dark Pools, Nightmare of Mensis' Frenzy Darkness, Elden Ring's Ainsel River Cliffs, but none match the original's commitment to removing player agency through light deprivation. Scholar's Candlestick. Some weapons are tools, some are evidence. The Scholar's Candlestick is a reminder that Dark Souls 2's scholars tried lighting the dark, and the dark lit them back. This tiny candlestick weapon found in Shrine of Amana serves dual purpose, terrible dagger and mandatory light source for navigating area. Scholars of Melphia studied the curse, researching solutions while the world fell apart. The candlestick was their field equipment, light to read by and something sharp for when reading attracted things that didn't want to be studied. Eventually, the scholars either hollowed or worse, leaving their equipment scattered through ruins. The disturbing part is mechanical. You need light to navigate Amana's flooded ruins, but holding this candlestick occupies your weapon slot. You're forced to choose between visibility and defense, making every encounter a decision about whether you'd rather see death coming or be prepared for it. The shrine's sorceresses cast homing projectiles from darkness. The water hides ledges and ambush enemies. Having light means eating damage you can't prevent. Giving up light means blindly stumbling into threats. But the deeper horror is itemization philosophy. The candlestick exists because scholars needed it. That means they worked in darkness this complete regularly. The Shrine of Amana Mana wasn't always flooded and hostile. It was a research site where people brought lights and optimism. The candlestick represents failure. All that study, all that light, and the curse won anyway. The scholars hollowed, their research scattered. Their light sources became weapons for players who stumble through ruins without understanding what happened here. Item description notes the candlestick provides meager light. The scholars knew it wasn't enough. They carried it anyway because insufficient light beats none. That resignation makes the weapon existential horror. People knew they lacked proper tools for survival and proceeded anyway because stopping meant accepting defeat. Dark Souls 2 fills with these small horror touches, items that tell stories darker than any boss. The candlestick teaches that sometimes the scariest thing is evidence that people before you tried and failed using the same tools you're relying on. Looking back, From Software didn't set out to make horror games. They made action RPGs where dying meant learning, then realized the best teacher is fear. These moments work because they're integrated. You can't skip the Gaping Dragon's design, avoid Blighttown's poison, or ignore the abyss staring back. Horror becomes mechanical, environmental, narrative. The trilogy peaks when all elements combine. Pinwheel is tragic body horror. Blighttown is environmental torture. Manus is cosmic dread. Oceiros is restrained implication. The Fair Lady is mechanical complicity. Each teaches different fear, proving From Software studied what disturbs humans and built gameplay around those findings. 25 million sales later, the community still argues which moment hits hardest. Some players put down controllers after Aldrich. Others needed breaks from Seath's archives. Speedrunners route around entire areas to avoid re-experiencing specific traumas. That longevity proves effectiveness. Horror that works once is jump scare. Horror that works after knowing every detail is craft. These games influenced a generation of developers trying to recreate the formula. Most copy the difficulty. Few understand the horror integration. From Software's secret wasn't making hard games. It was making players willing to endure disturbing content for the satisfaction of overcoming challenges. The horror becomes reason to persist, trauma becomes badge of completion, and we come back for more because facing fears in controlled environments feels like growth. But really, we keep playing because From Software proved games can disturb us on levels other media can't touch. Books describe horror, movies show it. Games make us participate, force us to engage, demand we stay in nightmare until we're skilled enough to survive it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every single book in Skyrim explained, click the video on the screen.